High on a hill overlooking the Brazilian coastline, two men were found lying side by side. The peculiar scene showed no trace of blood or violence, and the only clues were lead face masks covering their eyes and a cryptic note found in one of their pockets. This is Supernatural Signals, and tonight we are tuning into the story of one of Brazil's most enduring unsolved mysteries, the lead mask mystery, ritual in the hills. Today, we'll dive into the bizarre case by reviewing the key facts, analyzing the most talked about theories, and finally sharing my own thoughts and feelings about what might have happened that night. On the afternoon of August 20th, 1966, a young boy named Jorge de Costa was flying a kite near a hill called Morro do Vintém in the town of Niterói. He wandered out the path, chasing the wind, and suddenly stumbled across a scene straight out of a nightmare. Two adult men were laid out neatly on the ground as if they were placed there. They were both dressed in formal suits and strange waterproof raincoats, despite the hot weather. But what made this case seem ritualistic were the thick, handmade lead masks, shaped like sunglasses covering their eyes. And again, there were no visible injuries and no signs of struggle, just silence and mystery. The strange appearance and eerie stillness sent the boy running home in terror. The police began their investigation quickly, and the two men were easily identified as Manuel Pereira de Cruz and Miguel José Viana. They were both in their 30s and electronic technicians from the town of Campos dos Goitacazes, which was about 200 kilometers away from where they were found. Friends and family described them as rational and intelligent, yet they were fascinated by the occult, UFOs, and the idea of life beyond Earth. Mapping out their days prior to their death, the police discovered that on August 17th, they left home claiming they were buying supplies for work and took a large sum of money with them. They boarded a bus and arrived at their destination at 2:30 p.m. But it was found that instead of buying electronics, they bought waterproof coats, a bottle of mineral water at a local bar, and a notebook. A waitress at the bar where they stopped described Miguel as very nervous, and he was constantly checking his watch. This was the last confirmed sighting before their deaths. As the police investigated the objects found on their person, the case began to get even stranger. Besides their body was a torn notebook page, and on it read a cryptic message. 1630, be at the determined place. 1830, ingest capsules. After the effect, protect metals, await signal mask. The wording was very vague and had a ritualistic feel to it and caused more questions than answers. Who gave them this plan? And what was the signal? Were they expecting a spiritual awakening, a vision, or perhaps a visitor? Even more unsettling, no capsules were ever found. And by the time the autopsies were conducted, the internal organs were too decomposed to test for poison. So what caused their deaths? Now that we've taken the time to review the case, let's break down some of the theories that are illuminating the internet to this day. Keep in mind, many believe Manuel and Miguel were trying to reach a higher state of consciousness. They reportedly attended meetings of a local spiritualist group, believers in psychic contact, astral travel, and life beyond death. The note may have been part of a spiritual protocol, and the mask maybe to protect their eyes. But again, from what? An intense vision? A divine presence? Or something inhuman? A lot of people lean to the UFO theory because in the day before their deaths, multiple residents near Morro do Vintém reported seeing bright orange lights hovering in the sky. Some believe the men were attempting alien contact and the masks were protection from the intense light, too powerful for the human eye. But if it was a test, it certainly failed. And if it was a visitation, it left no trace. Now, others believe the men were victims, possibly manipulated by someone in their spiritualistic circle. Perhaps they were lured into belief, handed fatal capsules, and told to wait for the signal. And some speculate they were part of an occult, and this was the final test or ritual. But if so, the cult vanished, and no one came forward. And again, no arrests were made. No one ever claimed responsibility. And again, there was no cause of death. So, where does this lead us? The case was quietly closed, and again, the cause of death inconclusive. And the note was just filed away, never fully explained. And the so-called spiritualist group disbanded or buried deeper. And the mass locked away, grim relics of a mystery few seem eager to solve. Were these men naive explorers of the unknown, victims of belief, or simply in the wrong place waiting for a signal that never came? Before we wrap things up, let's touch on my own personal theories and the psychology of ritual. What I think is odd and honestly fascinating about the lead mask case is that the cause of death was never officially identified. And even stranger, we don't know much about the spiritual circles these men were part of. There's a void of context, so therefore we have a missing backstory. And all we know is that whatever they were planning, it seemed to deeply affect them. For instance, the bartender described one of the men as visibly nervous and looked alarmed. And that stuck with me because it made me think about how I handle nerves. Now, I haven't formally been diagnosed with OCD, but at times I do find myself performing little rituals when I'm anxious. Saying things 3 times fast, subtle hand ticks. It's like a way to reset my brain or feel like I'm creating order in the chaos. And some have suggested that the men's behavior and the items they carried, including the mask and the cryptic note, resemble elements of a ritual. But if we zoom in further, we enter a fascinating psychological gray zone. Rituals in both religious and historic traditions are meant to provide order, meaning, and a sense of control, especially when dealing with the unknown. And yet, when the structure becomes rigid or personal, and the outcome seems disconnected from logic or reality, it starts to blur into something else entirely: obsessive behavior. So this got me researching more about ritualistic behavior in the supernatural world and ritualistic behavior in the modern world. There's a theory in psychology that obsessive compulsive disorder, otherwise known as OCD, shares deep roots with ritualistic behavior. Again, both rely on repetition, strict rules, and symbolic actions. The difference? Rituals are often social and accepted depending on the context and the environment. And OCD rituals are private, compulsive, and usually bring distress. So I know I might be sounding repetitive myself here, but please bear with me. I have a point. So now we have the questions of, were Miguel and Manuel performing in a calculated spiritual ritual? Or were they caught in a psychological spiral, believing that only through these specific mysterious steps could they reach their goal? Whether the goal was contact with another realm, transcendence, or some kind of salvation, we may never know. But this theory adds another layer to the mystery, not just what they were doing, but why they felt they had to. And if so, what were they trying to control? And whatever it was, did it know the human mind well enough to have the upper hand? To know they would do the ritual to feel safe, to feel powerful, to fall right into its lap? Questions we may never have the answers to, but they're fascinating to think about. Alrighty, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. I'd love to hear your thoughts, theories, or personal experience down in the comments. I read them all. You can also follow me over on Instagram at Supernatural Signals. That is supernatural_signals for behind the scenes updates, extra content, and more strange stuff I stumble across. As always, stay curious and stay tuned into the supernatural. Thanks for watching.